the vulnerability will then allow you to basically develop the robustness and to develop an agile and inherent robustness. And ERM BCM will work together to deliver that robustness and that agile robustness. And the last point I want to take is that operational resilience approach, which is applicable to the ERM BCM on the day-to-day practice, can be replicated within ERM for strategic resilience. So, I mentioned in my introduction that about the rising prominence of resilience in business conversation. In my view, there are two related dynamics that may explain this rise in importance. The first one relates to the increasing fragility or vulnerability of businesses. This trend is driven to a large extent by the globalization of supply chains, increasing dependencies on very complex information systems. Furthermore, the drive for capital efficiency also reduces the ability of production systems to respond to and mitigate internal and external disruption. The drive for efficiency has reduced the option for redundancy in the systems, and as such, have increased the fragility of the system. These are just an example. There are a lot of dynamics around the technology themselves that drive the fragility of the businesses, the vulnerability. You compound that with an increasing level of threat, which is the second trend. I just mentioned two examples. One is being cyber attacks, the other one being natural disasters. But you could also mention financial, macroeconomic, even logistical or geopolitical potential threats to the continuity and sustainability of your operations. All these factors, when combined, evidence an increasing risk of disruption and an increasing stress on management systems to deliver resilience. So although resilience has always been part of the preoccupation of all businesses, this preoccupation, this concern has increased over the last 10 years at least, due to these powerful trends. I would note on top of it that there is potentially, after the recent event in terms of upheaval in the economy, in the technology and the weather and so on, that some of these trends are actually being pushed back with organization and supply chain and so on. But the level of globalization of the supply chain, complexity of the production systems and networks, as well as the continued drive for cost efficiency, still maintains a high level of fragility in the system. So now we will provide some background on the definition of resilience. So resilience, the official definition, I took it from Wikipedia, is the ability of a system to withstand changes in its environment and still function. This definition covers a spectrum of changes, from sudden changes, as in the case of the shutdown of a critical plant or asset, to a long-term change, such as in the case of the climate change-related regulations and market trends, which is, I would say, a change that is potentially having a high impact, will have a potentially high impact on the oil and gas business. When risk and business continuity practitioners looked at these two ends of the spectrum of changes, they used to consider them fundamentally different in nature and requiring different approaches. BCM for sudden interruption, disruption, and scenario planning or part of ERM for long-term changes. Recently, the trend is of considering those type of changes as part of a continuum. We have the sudden changes, but then you will have more slower changes, such as technology obsolescence or potentially the degradation or the bottlenecks in the supply chain. And these basically, although they are not as sudden as the interruption of a plant, basically impact your sustainability as a business. An example of this slow-moving is the present crisis in Europe with the shortage of gas or energy that is impacting basically a lot of industries at a relatively slow pace. So in the next slide, so recently, so there is less. So we know that we need to treat them as a continuum. However, there is less clarity or consensus on the implication of that relationship with the way to deal with them, on how we need to deal with them, deal with this spectrum of resilient changes, potentially disruptive changes. In the next slide, I will propose a framework for the handling of the resilience challenge that can provide, in my opinion, a common approach for delivering increased resilience. When one considers risk management practices across discipline, and not only BCM or ERM, one always notices many different practices suited to the particular challenges of each of the systems, let's say information security, HSE, and so on. I have always personally noticed the high level of sophistication of information security risk or cybersecurity risk management standard and processes. It's one of the most mature, sophisticated, and dynamic disciplines. One such practice is the threat and vulnerability approach to risk, which information security uses. It is very suited to risks or disruption driven by external events and internal factors. This is typically what resilience events are about. If one applies this to the resilience context, one can see that there is an intimate relationship between the threat or potential change in condition that will impact you and the vulnerability of the operating model or the asset that you're considering. An event will have a material impact if it can impact a process or asset. One can deduce from this fact that the vulnerability of an activity, process, or asset drives a disruption risk exposure. The question of whether a change in operating conditions can have a material disruption impact is defined by the vulnerability of the operating setup. So the starting point should always be the vulnerability. It will drive and basically determine the risk exposure to a large extent. So the logical consequence of this analysis is that the control of this risk should involve two components, namely delivering a robust operating model with as little vulnerability as possible, and the level of threat awareness focused on the threats to this vulnerable component of our operating model. As a side comment, I would like to mention that the starting point is the existing operating model, and the understanding of its vulnerability should be the first step. However, if we apply this approach in the strategy design stage, including the definition of the operating model, using this approach may help select operating model options based on their vulnerability or changes, or the vulnerability to changes, be they short-term or long-term. Now that we have defined the objective of our resilience management strategy, which should be robustness, inherent robustness of the system, reduction of the vulnerability of your asset, operating model, or strategy, and then awareness, basically awareness, early monitoring and early warning about the potential threats to this model, to this operating model through the vulnerabilities. The next step is to understand how does the strategy translate for ERM and BCM team and systems. So before going into describing how we can link ERM and BCM systems better in light of the threat and vulnerability framework, I will first list the key features of each management system. This is a high-level description of the theoretical features of each system. In practice, ERM and BCM practitioners work outside this scope. And as mentioned earlier, the BCM team will look at risks associated to their critical processes, and the ERM team will look also at contingency plans in case of operational or strategic disruption scenarios. But however, for the purpose of identifying potential contribution and better opportunities for integration between ERM and BCM, this kind of high-level approach is valid. So ERM is mostly a preventative system, forward-looking, focused on risk events, causes and events, trying to work as much as possible to prevent the risk from from happening, or at least from impacting you. And it's a continuous process, which involves continuous and sustained monitoring. While the business continuity management process is more focused on actually the event and consequence focus, reactive in nature, and more focused on monitoring the internal readiness. It's more of a contingent process. I know that I am simplifying, but at a high level, this is, we can see the two. And based on this, we can deduce from these features of between ERM and BCM that basically they can contribute to each other in a differentiated way to the objective of robustness and awareness. ERM contributes to robustness through the understanding of the threat scenarios and preventive mitigations and actions to increase robustness. So ERM will work is proactive, and ideally you want, when you have identified your BIA, the potential threats, you want to basically try to build up the resilience. So ERM will definitely be that focus. Although BCM already drives it, ERM can be the vehicle to basically identify and implement these proactive improvement opportunities. ERM is a continuous forward-looking system and has built-in threat monitoring, and as such can provide early warning and triggers for BCM system. So it can contribute and be, I would say, the main contributor to the awareness capability. So on the flip side, BCM strength lies in its ability to, especially the BIA, to pinpoint vulnerability factors in operations. This information can then be shared with the ERM team to focus their attention to the risks that could impact these vulnerability points. It is also key in delivering robustness through business continuity plans. We can see that ERM and BCM can feed useful information to each other that basically enhances the effectiveness of each of them. In the next slide, I will list and describe these useful information flows. I see potentially 3 areas of joint ERM-BCM activity. The first one relates to the one that was mentioned earlier by Dr. Mao, which is basically using BCM, the BIA, the business impact analysis in BCM, to drive the identification of risk of threats. Critical processes or resources identified through the BIA need to be subjected to an identification and assessment of the elements of vulnerability. This in turn will be used as a starting point for the related risk identification and assessments, which will be about identifying the threats, the events that could impact these vulnerability. The process to identify vulnerabilities will be through the failure mode and effect analysis, which is an engineering process approach to identifying basically the elements of vulnerability of a system. And it can be applied to basically many things, and including in this case, to the critical processes or resources that you will have identified through your BIA. The second area of collaboration will leverage the related risk information and related event scenarios to inform the business continuity plans, the testing programs, as well as the trigger protocols to trigger the business continuity plan, while in some cases you will be able to trigger the BCP even before the event is actually happening. The last area is the sharing of BCPs with ERM teams to identify early warning timelines and communication protocols to basically allow you to improve the awareness and basically be able to act as proactively as possible in the face of potential disruptive scenarios. So, for example, of this early warning would be an agreement on the notice required to increase stocks of raw material or finished product in case of increasing risk of a particular disruption scenario, for example, around critical supplies. In the next slide, I will present an alternative way to look at this ERM-BCM integration. This slide represents the integration of BCM and ERM system through a process lens. The BIA is the starting point, and the BCP is the endpoint. And the connection with ERM is through the FMEA, the failure mode and effect analysis, which translates the information on critical processes and resources into more granular disruption modes, which themselves can help identify disruption events of scenarios. The risk analysis process then delivers preventive and contingent actions or plans that can be fed into BCP in 2 ways. First, in the definition of recovery strategies informed by disruption scenarios, and second, by defining the preventive business continuity protocols to be triggered before the event itself appears. This process, although simple and almost obvious in theory, is challenging to effectively and efficiently put in practice. In the next slide, I will list some of the challenges and key success factors for successful and effective integration of ERM and BCM for resilience. In this slide, I'm covering some implementation challenges. The first one is when we be looking at critical processes or activities, the stress should be put on having an end-to-end perspective to look at the overall system, being the asset itself, or even the production system. So we'll be looking at delivery logistics with the redundant parts. So if we look at logistics from elements of the logistics like a terminal or transport mode like car, trucks, or we may miss actually the redundancy in the overall system. So it's important to look at it holistically, to have basically an overall end-to-end capability as opposed to very specific processes. Identifying systemic failure mode disruption events across critical process. So the idea will be to as much as possible when we look at the critical scenarios go back to start from these critical processes and resources that the BIA identifies, but as much as possible to try to identify through these failure modes that basically have a systemic contributors across process or resource or area.
Michael, be aware of time, please.
Okay. Yes, I'm going to quickly. I just have, I think, 3 more slides. So the key thing, I would say, I'll go to the last one. The challenge will be on the granularity. ERM usually works at a higher level, while for these FMEA scenarios and critical business process, you need to work at a relatively granular mode. So the challenge will be on deciding where is the granular risk register and how this granular risk register communicates with the corporate one. This is something that can be managed and that can be done jointly. So now I talked about the the ERM and BCM integration at the asset level. So normally when you have a plant and so on, you're looking at an organization. I would say that, as I mentioned earlier, the sustainability, the resilience challenge is not limited to these sudden short-term disruption scenarios. We can look at slow moving. And on top of it, we need to look also at the global production system. And to be able to basically apply this approach to the system, to the global production system, as well as to more slow-moving disruption scenarios. There are a few elements that are required. And the key one is to have to work together, ERM and BCM, to develop a joint production system model to be used with sufficient product granularity. We need to be able to model together the production system, and then use this model to stress, to understand to feed into it the BIAs and the information from the asset level, as well as the environmental scanning, and basically to transform, to stress test this model, this network model, with the different scenarios, to be able to then identify potentially the most significant disruption scenarios, but also okay. Production system robustness is the aim, and I will not do this one, but I'll go very quickly. Sorry, but no, it's okay. I'm talking here about the strategic risk management, which is, sorry? Yeah. Okay, I'll go quickly. I think I need just 2 minutes. I mentioned that we mentioned the assets, then we look at the global production system. As mentioned earlier, I think the approach can be applied to the strategic, the long-term changes, the long-term trends, and to look at strategic resilience, strategic sustainability. The only difference when we look at it, we'll be looking at the strategy, the operating model, and instead of looking at specific processes or critical activities, what one needs to look at are the critical value drivers of your strategy, of your business, and basically trying to understand the level of threats, the key element of your, basically of the value creation of your strategic model.
Michael, please conclude.
Okay. So key takeaways, enterprise resilience. So I'm summarizing. This is ERM and BCM need to work together. I would say that ERM, BCM takes the lead at the asset level, and as you go up together, they need to work on the global system, ERM, BCM. And I would say for strategic risk management, it's more like ERM. But there is a continuum, and the process is very simple, starting from the vulnerability and basically transforming this understanding of the vulnerability in an awareness of the risks, and basically using this awareness to drive basic 2 things, robustness and awareness. Clear? That's it. Sorry, there was more information. I'm done.
Thank you very much. Again, we will be holding the questions till the end of the session. We thank Michael for his presentation. We move on to our next speaker, Mr. Ahmed Safar, team leader, IT technology at Kuwait Gulf Oil Company, very experienced technology engineer, administrative history, work in information technology services and industry for over 20 years, mainly in the oil and gas industry. He has a master MBA focused in business administration and management, and he played a major role in providing IT solutions to ensure KGOC business continuity during COVID-19 pandemic. The floor is yours, Mohammed.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Aziz, for the nice introduction, and thank you, Michael, for the great presentation. Now we will change the topic from business continuity to another dimension where we'll speak about cybersecurity. I will try to make it a little bit simple and easy for non-specialized people, because usually if we speak about cybersecurity, we speak more about technology and how the technology is impacting. So I will cover 7 topics. I will talk a little bit about Facebook issue also that we faced last Monday. So let's start talking about money first. In the past decade, there is a huge investments in technology, in IT technology, and if we can compare between 2018 and 2020, we can see a huge gap, and there is still more expected in 2021 and 2022. People are investing more in technology, and during COVID-19 and the technology utilization have been changed worldwide. More investment in the technology, especially on the software level. There is some domains in the technology at this stage, they are really mature, like gadget and devices. People mostly retain their devices, their phones, their mobiles, their PCs, notebooks. Communication technologies, after releasing 5G, the speed of communication and the communication technology related to backbones such as fiber technology, WDM, and those kind of technologies are really mature, and we see less investment in these domains. Now, the majority of investment is happening at enterprise software level, where there is a huge investment in this. Again, I'm focusing on this because here is the main pain. So where this investment goes, the current setup in the modern technology is changing. We used to have a different standard when we deal with the technology. The new standard, they call it 4.0, Industry 4.0, focuses much more on automating and creating a smart factory. To get this smart factory, there is 4 or 5 domains where people are investing. Cybersecurity, physical cybersecurity. When we speak about this, access control, smart cards, payment cards, smart cars, blockchain, and all those kind of things. And then we have the Internet of Things, IoTs, where a lot of new devices comes equipped to communicate to their base, to inform the user about their situation, to allow the user to remotely control those devices, to share data remotely. And all these new gadgets like your TVs, your refrigerators, microwave, ACs, lights, all those kind of technologies would come with IoT support. They communicate to the internet and give you access to control and to inform. Now, there is more and more reliance on the cloud computing. And just a few days back when we had the Facebook blackout, everybody was surprised. No more Instagram, no more Facebook, no more Messenger, and all those applications were suddenly stopped because we are dependent on the cloud computing, especially on social applications. Cognitive computing, and there is a lot of investment in this smart technology where the technology start interacting with you. It's not only where you fill forms and help you to organize and store and historize data. Now you can take decision. We can do some analysis on those data and can give you a feedback. All these technologies collaborate together to give you a smart factory, where there's the smart refinery, there is smart oil field, like what is implemented in KOC, like we have the smart technologies implemented all over, and it is coming more and more. So I just wanted to highlight how COVID-19 impacted the world, and how collaboration tools such as Zoom that we are using right now, or Microsoft Teams, others applications, Cisco WebEx, and all those kind of collaboration tools have become a very important part of the modern businesses. This is graph, if you can see, is just in 2020, and just before COVID, there was less than 2 million users for Zoom and Google Classroom. Less than a little bit above 2 million users in beginning of March. Just after that, few days after that, it jumps to beyond 6 million on Zoom users, and it's keep increasing. This trends is what COVID created. COVID changed the way we interact, and it changed the way business runs. That was on USA. Just we go back to the local domain, and you can see Microsoft Teams and Zoom cloud computing meetings application are the top downloaded application in Kuwait. it's very important to understand that COVID-19 changed the working environment. And this change has an impact on our risk and the way we deal with the risks. So we go to 101 of cybersecurity. Now, we saw how much we are investing in technology. We saw how technology is changing our life. And we saw how COVID-19 accelerated the change. So let's go back to our basics. When we speak about cybersecurity, for this big investment and this tremendous change, what we should look for? We should look for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Like when we speak about confidentiality, when I'm putting my data on the internet, how we can protect them. Integrity, when they are passing through this huge network, I don't want anybody to see my data and tamper with them. Also, when we speak about availability, this is what happened with Facebook. They were not available for 5 hours. So it's very important that my system is always available and accessible from everywhere, all the times for the users. So this is the basic understanding of any cybersecurity. We need to protect this triangle to make sure that our systems are in a good condition. Now, what are the risk drivers for cybersecurity? Since we are communicating and using the system, humans are the highest risks. They are one of the main drivers. A human mistake can create a disaster. And we will talk about the risk later on, and I will show you how the human change and how human impact has changed can impact severely the cybersecurity. Technology is an art. So any art may have defects, vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities has an impact, and it gives holes to attackers or hackers to impact the systems. Also, it may have its own internal bug that it fails and create a bigger issues. Procedures, and this is very important. When you introduce new technology, when you introduce new tools in any business, you require to associate procedures with it to ensure that these tools and these technologies are used in the proper way. So these are the main 3 technology drivers. I'll speak a little bit about Facebook, just to emphasize the importance of technology. Facebook blackout, it was for around 5 hours. After the 5 hours, they start getting the systems up. It impacted 5 applications: Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, and Oculus. Those 5 applications were totally stopped, and around 3.5 billion user was not able to use the services. They expect 60 million loss in revenue, and that was a human error, and there was a wrong configuration on a human error. So it is very important. It is very important to understand that a human error can create a disaster of such size. Now, we'll go back to the main cybersecurity risks that is identified for 2021. And when we speak about this risk, I choose the top 10 risks that is discussed and that is identified as the top risks. And I started to associate with them the drivers that has the main impact on this cyber risks. Like a phishing attack, it's usually impacts humans. They try to fail the human by creating fake pages, fake links. And usually, if you have a smart user, he will identify if this is a phishing attack or this is a real tool. Also, your procedures, like if you introduce a proper procedure to identify unknown links, highly don't open unknown links, highly unknown links are having impact, and such procedures that help you to reduce the risks. Cloud jacking, And this is a very dangerous attack, where people try to steal your username and password, and then they go and manipulate your account on the cloud without feeling it. Many of those attacks, as soon as they were able to get your password, then they will be able to hack all your accounts. Usually, this is associated with human negligence when it comes to simple passwords, non-password, silly, I wouldn't say silly, I would say simple, let's say simple, pardon my language, simple usernames and simple answers for the secret questions. Also, technology, not implementing the technology properly, such as one-time passwords or what they call authentication passwords. Those are very important when you deal with cloud applications, because to have a tool to ensure your identity and to avoid stealing your accounts on the cloud is a very important tool you need to implement. Network and perimeter and endpoint security. Again, majority of the issues related to this kind of cyber security risk, it comes with a human error, admin configuration issues, where the configuration is not done properly, and the hackers or the attackers are able to find a loophole. Also, technology, but this is a little bit more control, where you have vulnerabilities, and sometimes an attacker can exploit a vulnerability and able to hack. Mobile malwares, more consumers are using more smartphones. Smartphone is another type of computers where it has its own bugs, its own vulnerabilities, and also they are out of control of the enterprise administrations. And users tend to install without understanding what they are installing on their devices. So you need to make sure that your mobile is able to is patched, having the proper tools. And there is a known attacks happens recently on iPhone and Android devices. And again, if in an enterprise, you need to apply procedures to ensure a proper controls. 5G. I have 3 minutes left and one more slide, so I'll try to accelerate this. We have now 5G, and 5G doesn't come with a technology and a security at the endpoints. They don't have a built-in technology that help the securities in the endpoint devices, and these are a very vulnerable, since 5G is now more in use, and many companies and countries are introducing a 5G technologies. IoT devices, cheap IoT devices comes with their own vulnerabilities. You need to patch them. They are computers, they are smart, so they need to have software patching, and they need to have software monitoring. Deepfakes, and I like to highlight on this one because this is a very important topic. Deepfakes is where a new technology is able to mimic your look and your voice. So somebody will create a video like the US president, or he create a video about you and try to fake your identity and try to send your voice to your friend, hey, help me, I need your credit card. Such kind of things. So deepfakes are new technologies where the computers and the algorithms are able to produce your own identity, but you need to make sure that you train your people to able to identify such things. Also, you need to create procedures to ensure that the proper people and the proper identity is recognized. Ransomware attacks, and usually high ransomware attacks, they focus on human errors. They are unknowns, and they try to steal and penetrate to the networks. Insider threats, make sure that you implement segregation inside your network, API vulnerability, make sure to keep update and use the proper procedures inside your internal network to avoid hackings. So in conclusion, human behaviors and consumers' technology are the main cybersecurity risk. So you need to control your human behavior inside your organization, and you need to reduce the consumer's technology that is attached to your network to get a better cybersecurity environment. Thank you, and this is my last slide. Aziz, back to you, and if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mohammed. Excellent. As usual, we will wait till after the session conclusion for questions. Our next speaker is Tamer Sharifi. He's a Deloitte ME partner, Kuwait risk advisory leader, and Qatar cyber and technology risk leader. Over 15 years of experience in risk advisory, specializing in cyber technology and risk services, including cybersecurity, business continuity, disaster recovery planning, internal audit, risk management, and compliance. Tamer, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I will just confirm that the screen is visible. So first of all, thank you very much for having me today. It gives me great pleasure to be with you. Throughout my presentation today, I will be focusing on the topic related to cybersecurity for digital OT, or the operational technology. I believe the previous presenter, my colleague, Mr. Ahmed Safar, has touched upon a lot of the topics that I wanted to start by giving an introduction throughout my presentation. However, I think we all agree that one of the key risks that the oil and gas sector is facing today, aside from the fact that the cybersecurity is emerging and is passing through a transformation, being an area of focus from the corporate IT and now focused on the OT security. I think one of the key things today that we see is the human aspect, as Ahmed alluded to. From a human perspective, and in my opinion, the key risk when it comes to cybersecurity, specifically in the OT environment and in the operational technology environment, is the fact that there is a lot of awareness that will need to be done and to educate users, specifically in the operational technology field, about the importance of cybersecurity, specifically speaking, when they are moving through a transformational stage and when they are shifting from the normal factories into the digital factories, or into the operational technology transitioning into digital technologies. Today, I'm going to be covering into the presentation 4 key topics, starting first of all with giving you a bit of a brief around the operational technology, the new world of challenges and opportunities that is awaiting us, and how the digital revolution, or the 4th industrial revolution, is going to impact the way we think about cybersecurity. And then I'm going to talk as well a bit about, in essence, what's the concept of digital? And when we put it in the concept of oil and gas, what does it mean and what does it entail? And then we look at the key challenges that are currently being faced by the oil and gas companies leaders. And then from a perspective of challenges related to the actual concept of OT security, and then give you a bit of a roadmap of how companies should be addressing the OT cybersecurity. As you are all aware, the digital revolution is fundamentally changing in the industrial landscape. Now we have more computing power, high-speed internet connectivity in the rise of the 5G networks. And of course, we have plenty of smart devices, robotics, artificial intelligence. There's no single day that passes without hearing about a new technology or a new initiative that is going to feed eventually into a digital factory. This has changed the way we think about the OT environments. This revolution in OT and the digitalization of industry control systems is turning energy and manufacturing enterprise into digital factories. This is basically providing a wide range of benefits, including but not limited to, of course, redesigning the way we develop products and we provide services, as well as making sure that this is providing us with a higher product quality, lower costs. However, when we realize all of these benefits, there is a price that we're paying, and there is a huge risk that we need to take into consideration, because we're talking about relatively immature environment that has been operating in a certain way for the entire past, and now moving all of a sudden into a digitalized environment without taking into consideration the risk and the control that will need to be put in place, and that has been actually developing in the normal corporate IT environments for the last 25 years. So today, when we talk about corporate IT environments being heavily mature from cybersecurity perspective, this didn't come overnight. This has come through a journey of around 20-25 years of developing cybersecurity controls, making sure that we have the proper protection mechanisms in place. And this today is the challenge that the OT environment is facing. Not to mention that the OT environments are very simple in nature. They are logic driven, and these environments will need to be transitioned immediately into digital environments, and this comes with a huge risk landscape that will need to be mitigated. The effort spent in running and protecting OT assets in today's riskier security environment is holding many companies back. I'm aware that plenty of organizations want to be the front runners into enabling the digital factories, smart factories, and moving into that digital transformation journey. However, when they think about the risk and when they think about cybersecurity aspects, they start to pull down a little bit and they start to think in a wider capacity. How do we manage that risk and at the same time make sure that we are moving towards a digitalized environment? If you look at the slides, this slide, there are multiple trends and developments that are currently taking place, and that will allow us to think about the resolution. If we think about how much time is it going to take us when we go through the journey of transforming into digital OT. So first of all, we need to take into consideration the significant growing number of connected devices. Today, we're talking about multiple layers in the operational technology environment that is connected to the corporate environment, and there is significant number of devices and equipments that are being connected. The integration between OT and IT, this has been a taboo for a very, very long time, but organizations can no longer stay away from integrating OT and IT environments. Not to mention that this would require immense analysis to make sure that we don't do it without making sure that we are safely doing it. It is also important to take into consideration that there is plenty of business opportunities and solutions. So companies can now choose from a wide variety of technical solutions that will allow them to think about this integration in a more secure manner. Expanding ecosystem of OT actors. There's a growing number of organizations that is entering into the OT ecosystem, including technology vendors, security providers, and plenty of other third parties who support it. But that will create another threat landscape. So in today's business, you will notice that we have additional layer related to third parties. Plenty of organizations are outsourcing a lot of technology operations, and that will also need to be mitigated. If we look to the right-hand side, you notice that when we talk about specific initiatives in digital factories and smart factories, we're talking about multiple initiatives that come together over a period of time, and it starts from an innovation trigger through a journey of peaking the expectations from these technologies, and then the thoughts starts to materialize, taking you into a downstream, and then moving into the plateau of productivity, whereby actually you have a mature technology that can serve the purpose behind those digital and smart factories. So there's a span and there is a timeline that is required for these additional innovations to be taken into consideration, and accordingly, we can develop our roadmaps to accompany all of these initiatives over the timeline. Now, moving on, and when we talk about the concept of digital, from a digital point of view, it is actually the rise of smart factories. It is the integration of the equipment, the sensors, the low-level equipments, and data analytics for an on-demand production and predictive maintenance. That sits at the heart of the concept of digital. How can we leverage the new technologies, or what is being called the disruptive technologies? How can we change that into technologies that will enable and complement the existing equipment and technologies that we have in place to make our factories or to make our field operations smarter? There are multiple benefits behind doing this. It will allow us to have processes that are becoming data-centric. It will allow us to benefit from efficiencies for fast learning, lower coordination costs, higher productivity and assets utilization, new business models that can be generated on the basis of cost efficiencies, increased safety because we will be able to visualize and we will be able to leverage the technologies in understanding how our equipment will need to be maintained and how do we ensure that we don't go into unforeseeable situations. Manual work is always going to be getting automated at the heart of this transformation, and of course shorter product life cycle because of the use of data analytics and the other innovative approaches. So without having a clear understanding of this variety of changes and how is it going to impact our business model, companies risk losing ground in today's business. Now, if we look from challenges point of view in terms of the leadership that is thinking about transforming into digital factories or digital fields, the key challenges are split into three main domains: people, process, and technology. And when we talk about process, companies do not have at this point of time an approach to OT security that is different from IT security, but at the same time integrated in a way that will allow us full visibility. Security processes are technology-oriented at this point of time and not rather aligned to the business priorities and the business objectives. From a people point of view, if you notice in today's business, OT and IT staff do not always cooperate and do not always collaborate, and there is a huge need for this collaboration to take place in order to address how we think about a collaborative approach. Bear in mind, when we talk about OT technology, we're talking about field engineers, we're talking about people who are having different set of KPIs to maximize production and to make sure that they are producing at the end of the day. While from a technology and IT corporate point of view, the key objectives are to provide technology environment without any interruptions. So there are different sets of KPIs, and there is a need for these KPIs to integrate so that we serve the purpose and the key business objectives. From a technology point of view, companies have difficulties implementing effective security as technology solutions are still relatively immature in the capacity of OT security. Technologies are changing fast. Companies are struggling to keep up to date with these, and it has to be something that is considered on an ongoing basis. Now, if we talk about the ultimate ways or the key challenges that we face into protecting a digital factory, we need to take into consideration the ever-increasing attack surface. The increased number and complexity of automation systems, tools, as well as the communication channels in the OT landscape, along with the emergence of communication channels for monitoring between previously independent objects in OT environments, coupled with expanded opportunities for criminals to plan and execute attacks, put in a huge risk landscape. And this landscape is going to be ever increasing, and accordingly we will need to make sure that it is protected and it is taken into consideration throughout our security transformations. The growing interest of cyber criminals in the industrial enterprise, and this one is quite interesting, because you will notice that with the maturity journey of the IT security, attackers will be facing more challenges to penetrate into corporate IT environments. And this is going to shift the focus from mature environments into less mature environments. And here we're speaking about OT environments that might be going into a digital transformation journey without doing their proper due diligence to protect and to ensure that they don't do so before having the right protection mechanisms. The underestimation of general threat levels I mean, in OT environments, what do we have today in terms of security protection? Very minimal organizations around the globe have mature capabilities from cybersecurity, specifically from monitoring perspective and from logs reporting perspective. You will notice that we have very minimal information about the threats that is targeting the industrial control systems and the OT environment. But that doesn't mean that it's not targeted. It means that we have little information to analyze how are we being targeted and what's the OT environment threat landscape is looking like. The misunderstanding of specific threats and the poor choice of protection options. The common mistakes that we see when we go and when we start developing a transformational journey for OT security is that we copy and paste the IT security roadmap. And that's typically not the way to do it, because when we talk about OT environment, we're talking about a completely different threat landscape. And I'll focus on this in the coming next slides. How do we differentiate and how do we target cybersecurity protections in the OT environment? But before doing so, in order to protect a digital factory and an OT environment, we need to implement an end-to-end security transformation program. No two companies are alike, and therefore no silver bullet exists to address the security concerns. The goal is to develop the capabilities required and to reach a mature state of security, a state in which cybersecurity is aligned with the strategic business objectives and adds real value to the daily operations, to the daily challenges that we face in our business operations. A transformation program and the implementation of solutions should be based on the industry practices and should not be taken into consideration without looking at the governance, risks involved, the security monitoring, the regulatory landscape, as well as making sure that we always have the capabilities to respond to any incidents that might take place. If you look to the left-hand side of this slide, you will see that there are multiple OT malicious objects that are currently, but the majority are trending at the Trojan horse level, dangerous objects, Trojan downloaders, and then the normal object malwares that we see in the IT environments are of a less presence in the OT environment. What does that mean? That means we will need to analyze in a different manner the OT environment than what we do in the IT environment. And in order to do so, it is expected that the OT security annual spend forecast is going to jump from $120 million to $1,115 as per a Gartner Competitive Landscape Operational Technology Security report that was published in 2018. Now let us look at a typical transformation roadmap and what are the key steps we need to think about when we think about cybersecurity in the OT environment. First and foremost, we need to define the critical business processes or what we call in different terminologies, the assets or the crown jewels. What are the crown jewels in our OT environment that we will need to protect? And once we identify that, we will need to identify and map the critical systems and users for these business processes. Then we will need to understand the risks and impacts behind those processes, and we need to focus on the top level events that can harm them, which means we will need to create threat scenarios that will take into consideration what if these assets have been compromised with these threats. And once that is done and we have a clear picture on what can harm us, we will select the right framework to assess the current state and the potential mechanisms that are in place to protect us, and what else do we need to put in place. And based on that, we will define a strategy and the target state for implementing cybersecurity controls in the OT environment, determining set of cybersecurity controls that will also be implemented as part of that, scoping and planning the activities or the initiatives for implementing those controls and initiatives, and developing the final roadmap that will allow you to take the process forward. Some of the key things we need to learn from the previous experiences that these roadmaps do not come overnight, and there should be a holistic solution to face those challenges. One of the key lessons learned from one of the exercises that we conducted in a large Dutch multinational company producing health, nutrition, and other products, and they wanted to implement the cybersecurity journey for over 100 production sites worldwide. And in order to do so, it was an approach that we followed where you need to break it down into multiple realistic components. First, you will need to focus on the industrial cybersecurity services that are being provided so that you identify the crown jewels. And then you start looking at the standards, the practices that you will need to be putting in place in order to formalize and standardize the process, a training program that will allow you to elevate the maturity level of the employees and the people who will be handling, and then site assessments that will allow you to understand the language, the terminologies, and the operations that the site people are trying to protect. And in my last slide, before I conclude, I wanted to highlight as well some of the key lessons learned. It is typically these 4 key pillars that will need to be considered at the cornerstone of any OT cybersecurity transformation journey. First,
Ahmed, please be aware of time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my last slide, so I'll spend a minute or so in this one, and then I'll pass it over. So from an incident response point of view, and I've intentionally put this at the first point, because from incident response point of view, when we are starting with the transformation journey, we are entering into an environment that is highly vulnerable. And it is expected that at the start of the journey, we will be hit with multiple incidents. So it is important that you start with an incident response capability that will allow you to react quickly and not to be turned off by any attacks that might be coming your way when you start with the transformation journey. From a security and awareness training program, it is important to have a comprehensive curriculum to train the team specifically in the OT environment so that they are prepared and they act as your champions to start developing the cybersecurity controls in the environment. In-depth security assessments that will be looking at the OT environments, understanding it inside out, so that when you put protection mechanisms, you are putting it in the right context. TIBER is the threat intelligence-based ethical red teaming exercises that is currently being implemented around Europe. And this is the right approach to do the cybersecurity technical assessments in the OT environment, because you don't want to waste your time into hundreds or thousands of assets conducting the typical approach, potentially harming vulnerable environment, legacy systems. But what you want to do is that you want to follow a threat intelligence approach and implement your ethical hacking activities accordingly. With that said, I hope I have provided a good brief and background on the way to go for the cybersecurity in the OT environments. And thank you very much for listening. And if there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to take them. Back to you, Abdulaziz.
Thank you, Tamer. Very excellent. And we have 2 more to go today, and we'll save the questions till the end. I hope I pronounced this one right, Mr. Kian Williams.
Yep, you're correct.
Yeah, you have very interesting bio, but I'm going to summarize it. Although you have a technical background, you're most interested in governance, executive leadership, and enterprises management, an expert in solving common cybersecurity problems by focusing on people, processes, strategy, without fixating on compliance or technology. And you basically like to work with people because you think people are the solution for everything. Kian, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Abdulaziz, and thank you to Dr. Al-Hanisi and the Kuwait ERM Conference. I appreciate that you allowed me to join you as a virtual panelist this year, and I look forward to contributing in person in the future. To the audience, you may have noticed that I have no slides today. That was intentional. My goal is to have a brief conversation that presents valuable information. If I accomplish my goal, then everybody will learn something that they can apply to their work. Using insurance to transfer risk is the focus of my conversation. My thesis, cyber insurance is an important tool, but it's only valuable if used properly. Many people overlook the fact that insurance is a financial tool that supports business continuity rather than a risk management tool that functions like other ERM controls and mitigations. The value of my argument will be revealed as we continue. Now, I understand that academically, security and risk management professionals are taught to think about cyber insurance as a risk management tool. The risk management process starts with establishing context. Then you conduct an assessment to identify the risks faced by the organization. Next, you apply risk treatment using one of the common options. Very often organizations are either going to accept risk, mitigate risk, avoid the risk, or transfer the risk. And when we talk about risk transfer, that's where insurance comes in. Now, related to insurance, a few items are important for consideration. Number one, insurance may change the impact that a major cyber incident has on the organization, but having insurance doesn't change the nature of the risk that you face. Number two, insurance provides financial resources that allow the organization to continue operating if the claim is allowable and paid by the insurance company in a timely manner. It's these two factors for consideration that I use to argue that insurance is better for business continuity planning than it is as a traditional risk management tool. Now, numerous business realities reinforce everything that I'm saying, and we'll dig into some of the factors for insurance. Reality number one, supply chain attacks like SolarWinds are a legacy threat that is getting more activity and more attention. If you go back to 2013, Target was the first globally known supply chain attack, and things have not improved significantly since then. Part of the lack in improvement relates to the complexity of systems and the complexity of applications, especially when you start talking about cloud services and the layering of SaaS providers on top of each other to build an information system, or even in the complexity of OT systems that rely upon multiple vendors that the organization may not understand the technology, how it's put together, how it functions, or how to reverse engineer it so that you can create your own custom patches and apply fixes and mitigations. Similarly, another reality is that few organizations have the time or the resources to invest what's necessary to create trustworthy and resilient systems. For my students in my business class, we often spend significant time talking about the race to get to the market first, because the first person in the marketplace has the greatest market share, and there are some economic incentives associated with that. When you apply that logic to technology organizations or to technology services, a significant risk is generated because they're not spending the time that it takes to ensure that system security engineering is applied, that the least number of vulnerabilities and weaknesses exist in their solutions. And it's the reason that you have this patch and release cycle that continues over and over again. I'm sure that people can think about how that applies to their favorite technology. The other consideration that leads us into the conversation about insurance is that beyond compliance needs, many organizations have significant room to improve the effectiveness and the efficiency of the security and privacy controls that they've implemented. Often compliance drives the need for a budget, because if you don't satisfy your compliance requirements, you can't operate. But there are numerous things beyond compliance, which is the floor, not the ceiling of a security program, that need to be considered. To address these business realities, enterprise risk management, security, and technology leaders have to understand the strategy, the objectives, and the limitations of their organizations so that they can work to ensure the right resources are provided to address the most common concerns based on the risks they face. They must also communicate actionable and effective information to the board and to senior management, who are ultimately responsible for making the decisions about what to invest and where to invest, and how many resources to dedicate to different activities within the organization. For the board and for senior management, and senior management applies if your organization has no board of directors, understanding the cybersecurity risk faced by the organization depends on the insight and the advice provided by experts, represented by everybody at the conference, who present data in a context that is meaningful and appropriate to drive decisions. This information is critical because of the fiduciary responsibility of board members. A fiduciary is a person required to act for the benefit of another person. In the case of corporate fiduciaries and businesses, directors serve the corporation itself. For example, I serve as the chair of the risk committee for a global organization, and I previously served as the president of the board of directors for the Information System Security Association. In both organizations, my onboarding process stressed the fact that directors may not delegate their fiduciary duties to others. Instead, fiduciaries on the board have to depend upon the information that's provided so that they can make good decisions for the benefit of the organization being served. The primary fiduciary responsibilities of directors on a board are the duty of care and the duty of loyalty, related to our conversation. When you talk about the duty of care, acting diligently and competently is the key. As a director, you're required to act with the diligence and competence of a reasonably prudent person in a similar position of like circumstances. The idea is that you are supposed to be able to be measured based on your decisions, considering what somebody else in the same position would have done. And this highlights why access to security expertise at the board level is so important. The duty of loyalty focuses on placing the interest of the company first. For success with cyber insurance, again, which is the key to our conversation, and to satisfy the duty of care and the duty of loyalty for the company, the board and senior management must be aware of the effectiveness and the adequacy of controls and safeguards that have been put in place by the organization. We care because the failure to implement essential practices is leading the cost of cyber insurance to increase, while the level of coverage provided by insurance companies is increasingly going down. Insurance companies are also starting to scrutinize claims and verify the root cause of incidents before making a payment. Many claims for preventable incidents are being denied, and even things that may not have been preventable are not receiving the same level of coverage that they did in the past because the frequency of claims is significantly increasing. It's imperative that board members review policies, compare them to established practices, and ask the right questions about how security and risk management are taking place within the organization so they can focus on improving the situation to reduce the likelihood that insurance is even a consideration. One of the greatest problems with cyber insurance is the way that organizations respond to the questionnaires that they complete to determine the risk and the rate of insurance coverage that's provided by the organization. And this idea is the foundation of the title that we selected for this talk. The definition of key terms in cyber insurance policies is critical. No official glossary of cybersecurity terms exists. The understanding and the application of common terms and definitions like event, incident, and breach that affect insurance coverage vary significantly depending on the industry, the location, where the organization operates, and even professional standards used by the company. In addition to defining important security concepts, related business concepts must also be defined and clearly understood. For example, most insurance policies do not define diligence, but the insurance provider expects appropriate effort from the insured company to apply proper care and attention to managing cyber risk and preventing regular and ordinary exposures from being the source of a breach and part of a claim. The insured company must also define diligence first, and then make sure that the policy that they select from the insurance company aligns with the insurer's definition of diligence so that there's no confusion. The status and the maturity of the company's security program can also affect the premium and the insurance companies that are willing to provide cyber insurance. Because I work in consulting, I see many situations and many outcomes and different approaches to the problem. What I have observed is that many insurance companies are starting to perform exposure analysis to evaluate the type of business, the revenue, the security programs, confidential information collected, the processes for storing and backing up sensitive information, the frequency and the impact of web vulnerabilities, and a whole list of other concerns that influence how they recommend limits on the insurance policy and the cost of the premium that's provided. What they usually use to start the conversation is a cyber insurance questionnaire. A cyber insurance questionnaire allows the insurance company to evaluate the risk that a prospective customer is going to introduce without adding a significant expense or a significant burden to the insurance company when they're performing this evaluation. Companies in the cyber insurance industry do not ask universal questions to assess the risk involved. If you go from company to company, you're going to see a host of different questions. Some questionnaires focus on concerns as simple as whether the company has virus protection and a security system like a firewall in place. Other companies ask more complicated questions about specific cybersecurity technologies like security information and event management and extended detection and response, or XDR. Some insurance companies even ask about vulnerability assessments, the frequency of penetration testing, or they will hire third-party companies to conduct detailed evaluations of a prospective client. You would think about it like life insurance, where if you were going to get a $10 million policy, the life insurance company would send a medical professional to do a workup of the patient to make sure that they're not going to die, to reduce the likelihood that the claim is going to be paid. The goal of the insurance questionnaire is to evaluate risk. The challenge for organizations is that many of the questions are binary and allow only a yes or no answer. And so it could be a question about whether or not you have XDR. A lot of organizations, if they have limited resources, will apply advanced technologies to the most significant concerns, but those technologies are not applied to the entire organization because of the cost associated with it. So that admitting that there's no antivirus protection, or admitting that you don't have a firewall across the organization for all of your gateways might cause the insurance to deny coverage. And so people exaggerate or they don't provide clarifying answers. XDR may exist, but it only applies to critical business systems. The lack of nuance and the pressure to exaggerate often drives companies to distort the situation for the benefit of lower premiums or simply to obtain coverage for a risky company that would otherwise be denied. Yielding to this pressure is a recipe for disaster. The insurance company may issue the policy based solely on the answers provided in the questionnaire, but most insurers are going to conduct thorough investigations when a claim is filed to verify that the insured company met the obligations that were specified in the policy. Often the insurer will not only deny the claim, but may also cancel the policy if the claims investigation finds that information was false or exaggerated when the questionnaire was answered, and they may also notify other insurers in the industry. And so it becomes extremely imperative that the organization provides factual information, that you work with your attorney, that you work with an insurance broker to make sure that you understand the questions, the impact of your answers, and the outcomes that may be produced as a result of your answer to the questions on the questionnaire. The other thing to consider about insurance is that insurance is a contract between two parties. And so it's not just what you were answering on the questionnaire, but it's also the questions that you ask of the insurance company. Think of the policy as a document that formalizes the relationship between your company and the insurance provider, and the best relationships are mutually beneficial. So not only do we want to provide accurate and factual information on the insurance questionnaire, but you also want to make sure that the insurance coverage is going to address key issues. For example, what types of incidents are covered and what types of incidents are excluded becomes a very important consideration in your planning. Many insurance companies are going to limit coverage to first-party damages like fines and incident remediation costs that apply directly to the insured, but they often exclude third-party claims that apply to partners or customers or SaaS providers or third-party services that store, process, or transmit your information. Another important question to ask is about any regional restrictions on the policy. This is extremely important for global organizations. How quickly must the insurance company be notified about a covered breach or incident is also an important issue, because your claim may be denied if you don't respond in a timely manner, or if you don't notify the insurance company within the time frame that's outlined in the policy. Also, knowing how quickly the insurance company responds is going to be important. If we're using insurance for business continuity and to provide financial resources so that the organization can continue operating, it's very important to know, is the insurance company going to respond to the claim and provide those resources within a week, within a month, within 90 days? The timeliness of the response and paying the claim is going to be very important information when you're dealing with an emergency. Also, asking how often the insurance provider assesses and reevaluates the policy is going to be important, because the technology environment that we're operating in changes very drastically. The most important key for success with the time that I have available is not to sign an insurance policy that you don't understand. Policy language and policy definitions matter because they serve as the foundation of the policy. All policies have an insuring agreement that defines what's covered. They list exclusions and endorsements. The structure and language clearly define the scope of the contract between the insurance company and the insured, and it is imperative that you understand what you're signing up for when you're using when you're using cyber insurance as part of your security program in the mix of risk management solutions that you have available. For now, that's all of the time that I have available. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to engaging in the Q&A session that follows.
Thank you very much, Kian. You speak the same language we speak because we do spend a lot of effort in risk engineering, reducing the probability, and we do expect insurance companies to give us better premiums based on the effort we put. The last speaker of the day, Mr. Ghalaf, we had to move him from the second session because of the time, and he will be joining us now. He's the team leader of enterprise risk management at Kmbc, and he will be sharing his experience on how Kmbc effectively implemented business continuity plan at the time of the COVID crisis. Abdulhamid, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Basoud. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank Kmbc and the organization committee to accept the paper from Kmbc about the development of business continuity plan during the Corona time. And I will share my screen now. Our agenda today will start with an overview. Then we will talk about the role of Kmbc Risk Management Department during the Corona. Then we will explain about the outbreak of infectious disease risk definition. And we will discuss the details for the risk treatment methodology. And finally, we will talk about how we develop the business continuity plans for unavailability of manpower or loss of workplace. As you know, on December 2019, coronavirus identified in China. Then afterwards, first confirmed case in Kuwait was on February 2020, and on 11th of March 2020, who declared COVID-19 as a pandemic, and the consequences of this pandemic, the Kuwait air and land border closed. Here we'll talk about what is the role of Kmbc Risk Management Department. First, Risk Management Department identified the risk and called a meeting with the Kmbc top management. And afterwards, Kmbc top management assessed this risk as very high and called for all departments to prepare the risk details, such as the consequences and the existing control. And later, Kmbc ERM team developed a template to be utilized by all Kmbc departments to identify the causes and consequences and what is the mitigation measures. And afterwards, a workshop were conducted with all departments. Then also with the department managers, then with DCO. And as the procedure in Kmbc ROC meetings, also we conducted and we approved the risk definition and the risk owners for this specified risk. After finally, the risk description is defined as the risk of shortage of manpower. Here we are talking about the manpower, Kmbc employees and the contractors and other resources, such as equipment spare, catalyst due to outbreak of infectious disease locally and globally, leading to disruption in department activities and refinery operations, thereby failing to meet department objectives. And considering the type of this risk, Kmbc top management decided to assign the risk owners for this particular risk to two departments. The first department, HSE, and the second department, Risk Management Department. And here, the risk treatment methodology consists of two parts. The first part related to health and safety, and this is assigned to HSE, and the development of business continuity plan for unavailability of manpower or loss of workplace due to infectious disease, and it was assigned to the risk management department. I will talk in a brief about the activities for the health and safety, including 4 activities. The first activity, surveillance and communication. This is including the establishment, the internal committees and the external committees, and in order to make the communication with Ministry of Health easy and to apply any instruction in Kmbc. Education and awareness. Here, Kmbc issue guidelines for all Kmbc employees, and in order to ensure the implementation of the required measures. And here, safeguarding of employees' well-being. Here, distribution of wearing the face mask and the sanitizers, also distribution of the temperature devices in all Kmbc buildings. And finally, develop or update HSE procedures in order to include the effect of the COVID-19 in our procedure. The second part, we will talk more detail for the second part because it is assigned to risk management department, and it is the subject of this paper. Preparation of business continuity plan for unavailability of manpower or loss of workplace. This activity, in order to develop it, is assigned to risk management. So it is including 6 steps. The first step is COVID-19 survey. A survey prepared by risk management team and distributed to all Kmbc departments in order to assess the impact on people, on operation, on finance, and to ensure the availability of business continuity plan in place, or if it is not available, what is the action plan taken to ensure the continuity of the business. And as per the results from this survey, we developed a template, and this template also we again send it to all Kmbc department. In addition to, we conducted 25 workshops to include all Kmbc departments and divisions, and to ensure their awareness about this template, and in the second hand, to understand their feedback or comments in order to enhance this templates. After revising this template based on the department's comments, we obtained the ROC approval to circulate the BCP to all Kmbc divisions. And finally, the more than 160 business continuity plan were signed by the department managers. Here I will discuss in details what is the template components. The first component is it is like introduction, and here we highlighted that this business continuity plan is to ensure the business continuity in case of the following scenario. The first scenario, unavailability of manpower. Here what we are meaning unavailability of manpower due to any of infectious disease. And the second scenario, the loss of workplace, and here we are meaning here loss of workplace due to any infectious disease. And we make 2 assumptions based on the department comments: the resources to be allocated for 1 month and the required gate passes are available. The first template here, division and processes during unavailability of manpower. Here we mentioned that for each department, they have to mention their processes, and for each division, they have to mention their processes, and to assign the workplace can be identify the possibility to work from home or no. Then as per the scenarios of unavailability of manpower, they had to indicate what is the performance for these processes. It will be full or partial or will be suspended. For this scenario, if the unavailability of manpower by 25% or 50% or 75% or 90%. Here, they have to mention if any training required in order to avoid any suspension of the work, and list of any additional resources required in order to perform the work. The second template, it is optional because it is not applicable for all Kmbc departments. And here we have to highlight what is the designation for each division, for example, team leader, senior, engineer, and the company or secondment and or contractor, and identify the numbers. For example, if the government decided to make the percentage of the employees at workplace by 50%, each division each division has identified number for the employees, and they can utilize this table. It is very well prepared for any scenario. The next is divisional alternate workplace during loss of workplace. This is for the second scenario. The first two templates, it is for the first scenario. The second, and this template, it is for the second scenario during of loss of workplace. Here, each division, they have to identify what is the workplaces in the custody of the division, and if there is any alternate workplace, they have to identify it here, and what is the location for the alternate workplace, and what is the maximum percentage of manpower at the alternate location can be occupied. If there is any type of training required, they have to mention it here. Any additional resources they have identified here. And then each divisional processes during loss of workplace, they have to prioritize the processes based on it is a criticality, and they have to identify it here the possibility to carry out the work from alternate workplace or from home, and they have to indicate yes or no, and what is the performance of the to execute the process or activity. They have to mention full or partial or will be suspended. And finally, we have the contact list. They have to mention the contact list for each employees or stakeholder, and this list to be utilized during the activating of this business continuity plan. I will give you the example here for Kmbc medical division. They prepare the business continuity plan for their division. For example, they prioritize their activities. For example, the first activity, managing emergency cases. They can do it from workplace, but at home, no. But during all of unavailability of manpower scenarios, this will be full. The second activity, regular checkup. For example, here they can do it in workplace, and they can also do it at home. And here the list of training required, they mentioned awareness for employees on Webmaster, and the resources required WhatsApp business account, and so on. Here also an example for the same division regarding to how to loss of alternate workplace. They mentioned that, for example, this is example for Mina Ahmedi clinic. If there is any alternate workplace, yes. What is the alternate workplace locations? Mina Abdullah clinic, head office clinic, and Mina Ahmedi field clinic, and Sabhani clinic. All, and here, what is the percentage of manpower at the can be occupied at the alternate workplace. Here 30%, here 10%, and here 50%. We noticed that here in the resources, they required medical equipment and logistic, because this place and the head office and Mina Abdullah and Sabhan clinic, it is already existing. But Mina Ahmedi field clinic, this is additional resources to be are required. In addition that, they indicate where it will be, lobby of Mina Al-Ahmedi admin building. And what is the effect of the alternate workplace on the processes? Here they indicate managing emergency cases. They can do it at work, alternate workplace, but at home no. And the level of performance will be full. This is the last of the example. And finally, we create more than, signed more than 160 business continuity plan covering all Kmbc divisions. And finally, I will end by Benjamin Franklin statement: by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. And thank you for your time. Any question, please let me know.
Thank you very much, Abdul Hamid. Appreciate it. I have some questions that came from earlier. Maybe we will start with Mr. Are you there, Mr. Kian?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, we have somebody's asking about contractors submitting claims for project delay because of COVID-19 pandemic. And the question is, how can we tackle this issue? So I thought claims, you talked about claims, we'll hand that over to you.
Yeah, one of the things that I found in all insurance is that you can only do what is explicitly stated in the policy. And so if you did not address claims based on COVID as part of the policy, the claim either will or will not be allowable. If you think about it as flood insurance, for example, I do not know of any flood that has ever plagued the country of Kuwait. And so most people in Kuwait probably don't have flood insurance for their homes or their businesses. If there is a flood, you can't file a claim for flood reimbursement. The same thing happens with natural disasters that would happen with COVID as a pandemic. One of the other things to consider, and I would talk to your attorney about this, is that some things that are extraordinary are usually not covered by insurance. There's often a force majeure clause that talks about natural disasters, that if it's not explicitly allowed, it's almost automatically prohibited or denied because it's not covered, because it requires an additional rider or some special contract language. And so if your insurance doesn't cover claims for COVID, then that would be a gray area that will require some additional conversation.
Okay, actually, it might come surprise to you. Number one cause of claims in our projects is rain.
Excellent.
Okay, we have another question about business continuity. How the business continuity management system can be linked or affected by the facility life cycle plan and future carbon footprint impact of fossil fuel. Do we have, I'm not sure what maybe we'll move on to this question. Where should the business continuity management system sit within the organization? In risk management or somewhere else? And we have still some of you there. You can answer that question.
Yeah, I don't want to monopolize all the answers, but I would argue that any significant role in the organization should be placed where it's most effective. That I've seen chief information security officers have reported to general counsel because it adds the most value for the business. I've seen them report to the CIO. I would argue the same idea for business continuity management. I've seen BCM report to facilities management because in a plant, the facility is more important than anything else. It depends on where it's going to provide the most value and the most impact for the organization. which leads to them receiving the best resources available.
Okay. Let's see here what else we have here. Right. What is the probability of violating the cybersecurity of any organization, even if it uses strong system protection? I think Ian, they're the only one.
I'll
that
take
can
this.
that. Oh, Mahmoud, yes, of course.
Yeah. Thank you, Aziz. I believe that in any environment, there is no 100% security. When we implement cybersecurity, we do our best effort, and we try to increase the security to a level that the business is running smoothly and the security is sufficient to ensure proper confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Internal attacks can happen in any organization. Human errors, mistake can happen in any organization. Vulnerability can be found in any system. So there is a probability, but we try to reduce the probability. The work that a cybersecurity officer will do, a CIO will focus on, is to reduce the risk associated with cybersecurity attack. They will not eliminate. There is nothing 100%. And even and this is, I think, one of the key concepts in risk management. We'll try to identify and find a mitigation, the best mitigation that we can, but there is no 100% accuracy, and that is my answer for this question.
Okay. Unless there's something from you guys, we like to thank all our speakers. We like to thank all the participants, the attendees. You have yourself a wonderful afternoon and a nice evening, and we'll see you same time tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. The starting tomorrow is at 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
So